بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of 40 Hadith. As you remember, we were talking about dhikr. Hadith number 18 is about dhikr, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and invocating His names. The next chapter is about some of the merits of remembrance of Allah and loving each other for the sake of Allah. The reason we talk about loving for the sake of Allah is the ending of the hadith. As you remember, and I will repeat, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Ana jalisu man dhakarani, I am sitting with the one who remembers me. فَقَالَ Musa alayhi salam asked, فَمَنْ فِي سَتْرِكَ يَوْمَ لَا سَتْرَ إِلَّا سَتْرُكَ, who is under your cover and protection the day in which there is no cover except your cover? فَقَالَ الَّذِينَ يَذْكُرُونَنِي فَأَذْكُرُهُمْ وَيَتَحَابُّونَ فِيَّ فَأُحِبُّهُمْ. Allah mentioned two groups of people. Of course, these are two qualities, but they come together. It's like two sides of the same coin. Those who remember me and I remember them. These are under my cover. And يَتَحَابُّونَ فِيَّ, those who love each other for my sake and I love them. So if you remember him, he remembers you. And if you love each other for the sake of Allah, He loves you all. فَأُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَرَدْتُ أَنْ أُصِيبَ أَهْلَ الْأَرْضِ بِسُوءٍ ذَكَرْتُهُمْ. These are the people that if I decide to send some kind of punishment to the people of earth, when their crimes, go very high level and increase, then I remember them, and because of them I would remove adhab from the people of the earth. So because of them everyone else will be saved and blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they are kind of aman and protection for earth. Okay, so because of this end, that يَذْكُرُونَنِي فَأَذْكُرُهُمْ وَيَتَحَابُّونَ فِيَّ فَأُحِبُّهُمْ, those who remember me and I remember them, and those who love each other for my sake and I love them, we have this chapter about the merits and outcomes of remembering Allah and loving each other for the sake of Allah. The first merit, that is the greatest one, is that when you remember Allah, Allah would remember you. Of course, I mentioned in the last session, it doesn't mean that Allah only remembers these people and the rest Allah will forget them altogether. No, as I said, this is remembrance with love, remembrance with kind attention. So when Allah forgets some people, it means that Allah would not remember them favorably. This is what we explained. So remembrance of Allah is very important. And then Imam Khomeini mentions three stages of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being remembered by Him. Of course, this is mentioned just in 3-4 lines very briefly, and It's a difficult topic. I ask Allah for help, and we also discuss it briefly. He says, if someone remembers signs of Allah, names and attributes of Allah, then his basira, his insight, his inner vision would become stronger. تذکر آیات و اسما و صفات و یادآوری حق و جمال و جلال او قوت دهد بصیرت را و رفع حجب نماید به قدر قدرت تذکر، به قدر قوت تذکر و نورانیت آن. Remembering signs, names, attributes, remembering that Haq means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the absolute truth, His beauty and glory strengthens the insight and removes the barriers, the veils, as much as you remember Him. So proportionate to the strength of your remembrance and to the nuraniyat, to the light of your remembrance, your basira will be stronger and veils will be removed. So maybe this happens to you sometimes. But now we go to another level. چنانچه تذکر آیات حق و ملکه شدن آن. But if you remember Allah's signs and communications and make it a permanent and fixed state. You remember in the past we have several times talked about malaka. We said malaka is a quality which is permanent. Of course, many times we have explained what we don't mean by permanent means eternal. We mean something which is not transient. So malaka is opposite to hal. Hal is transient condition. For example, maybe for few days you are kind, then not. For few days you are brave, then not. Or someone, for example, for one day is generous, then the next day goes back to what he used to be. But malaka is a kind of position which is not soon changeable. You can change it. When we say permanent, it doesn't mean that it cannot. It means it's a condition that unless you remove it and eradicate it, it's your situation. So, if this remembrance becomes malaka, becomes permanent, means all the time you remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this strengthens your basira to the extent that he can see the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the signs. Basirat batini ra biqadri quwwat dahat. It gives so much of power and strength to that inner insight که جلوه جمال حق را در آیات مشاهده نماید. That then he can see the face of God, the beauty of God in the signs. So you look at everything and you can see the beauty of God in them. So instead of them reminding you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you can see Allah's beauty everywhere. So you are one step closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. و تذکر اسما و صفات موجب شود که حق را در تجلیات اسمائیه و صفاتیه شهود کند When you remember Allah's names and attributes, you can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in things which are His manifestations, in His names, in His qualities. وتذكر ذات بی حجاب آیات و اسماء و صفات. But if you can go one step even further, and not only you don't need to be reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't even need signs and names and attributes of Allah help you. You keep thinking of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's essence. Of course, it's not something easy for people like us, because we are very much used to remember Him through creatures, or maximum through His qualities and names. For example, we think of Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Alim, Ya Adim, Ya Wadud, His names, His attributes. But if you can go even further and remember Him in His essence constantly, then all hujub, all the veils will be removed, and you would see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any cover, without any veil. And this is what mystics call Fathul Futuh. This is the conquest of the conquests. This is the greatest conquest. So these three levels, they call it Fathun Qarib, Fathun Mubin, or Fathun Mutlaq, or Fathul Futuh. The first one, the first level, that you try to think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through His signs and names and attributes, and gives you some strength in your basira, is Fathun Qarib. When you make it a malaka, a permanent condition, then it is Fathun Mubin, it's a clear conquest. And when you can even go beyond the signs and names and attributes and think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's essence, then this is Fathun Mutlaq, absolute conquest, or Fathul Futuh, conquest of the conquest. In the same way, or similarly, when in loving each other for the sake of Allah, you also rise. Because we said we talk about two things: remembering Allah so that He remembers you, loving each other for the sake of Allah so that He loves you. Here also, in loving each other for the sake of Allah, we can have different levels of purity. It can become better and better, purer and purer. And if you can reach the level you love each other for the sake of Allah, without any expectation, without any attention to anything else other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then again there will be no hijab, no veil between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Khomeini says, so maybe this is the way to connect this ending question when he asked Musa alayhi salam, asked, Man satru fi satrika, who is in your cover, under your cover and protection on the day of judgment, to the thing that Allah had said before, Ana jalisu man dhakarani. So from Ana jalisu man dhakarani, Musa alayhi salam started thinking of meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, visal, and meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then wanted to understand how, and Allah mentioned this happens through remembering me and loving each other for my sake. The next chapter is about the difference between tafakkur and tadhakkur. Tafakkur means contemplation or thinking, pondering, reflecting on something. Let's say contemplation. Tadhakkur means remembering. So we need both tafakkur and tadhakkur. But which one comes first? Tafakkur comes before tadhakkur, because it is through contemplation that you are able to come to remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, Khaja Abdullah al-Ansari, the famous mystic who has the book Manazil al-Sa'irin, stations of the wayfarers, he says, At-tadhakkuru fawqa tafakkur. Tadhakkur is above, is higher than tafakkur. Remembrance is higher than contemplation. Why? فَإِنَّ التَّفَكُّرَ طَلَبٌ وَالتَّذَكُّرُ وُجُودٌ. Contemplation is talab, is a kind of search. When you think, means you are trying to come to a conclusion. Those of you who are familiar with logic, you know that they explain tafakkur like in this way. A very typical classic definition of fikr is حركة الذهن من المراد إلى المبادئ ومن المبادئ إلى المراد. Means you have a question, then you start searching in your mind for relevant information so that you put them together to come to the conclusion about what was your issue. For example, you wanted to understand whether the earth is created or not. You go to your mind and you find that al-alamu mutaghayyirun wa kullu mutaghayyirin hadithun fal-alamu hadithun. You say, okay, one of the qualities of this world is that it is changeable, and everything which is changeable is created. Therefore, this world is created. So, the question was what? Whether alam is created or not. What did you do? You made a search in your mind to find relevant premises that you can put together and clarify whether it is created or it's not created. This is called fikr. So fikr is a kind of search, a kind of quest for understanding by referring to your information that you already have and see whether you can find something that clarifies the subject at issue or not. So fiqh is talabun, is a kind of search, a kind of quest. وَالتَّذَكُّرْ وُجُودٌ. But remembrance is a kind of existence, is existential, is a kind of result, a kind of achievement. Like, for example, sometimes you are looking for water, sometimes you have had water. Fiqh is like search for water. Tadhakkur is like drinking water and quenching your thirst. So tafakkur comes before tadhakkur. And therefore tadhakkur is a higher level than tafakkur. When you reach the level of tadhakkur, means that you are reaching your Lord, you are meeting your Lord, and this is why it is called in our Hadith as it's introduced as something better than 1 year of ibadah. Tafakkuru sa'atin afdal min ibadati sana, or ibadati sittina sana, ibadah, worship of 60 years, or ibadat sab'ina sana, 70 years of ibadah. So if you can think properly, contemplate properly for a while, for a sa'a doesn't necessarily mean 60 minutes, because in the past this kind of definition was not for sa'a. Sa'a is a portion of time. So if you think for a while in a positive, productive way, it's better than 1 year or 60 years or 70 years of ibadah without thinking. Of course, if you're thinking and ibadah come together, that's amazing. That would be something that maybe you cannot understand how valuable it is. Those who pray with thinking, with contemplation, those who read the Quran with contemplation, those who give charity, those who give lectures, those who teach, those who help each other, those who, wash, clean home, or masjid, whatever, with fiqh, with contemplation. That's beyond our imagination. But if it's a matter of just physical engagement in ibadah or contemplation about positive issues in a productive way, contemplation for a while is better than physical engagement in ibadah without thinking for a year or 60 years or 70 years. The result, the outcome of ibadah, what we are trying to achieve through ibadah, is remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore tafakkur is so important because it helps you to achieve what is the ultimate goal in ibadah. And he says for ordinary people, for different groups of people, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has different outcomes. But for awliyaullah, for the friends of Allah, they are not looking for something beyond as outcomes of tazakkur. For them, this tazakkur itself is qayat amal, is their ultimate end. They don't want to get anything, from this. This has, for them, independent value. By itself is their end, and actually is ultimate end. Because through this, they have achieved meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for people who are in the middle or lower stage, of course, this remembrance of Allah can help them with achieving lots of good things with respect to their akhlaq and a'mal, with respect to their traits of character, to their actions. So he says we need to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to avoid anything which would displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all the calamities and catastrophes that spiritually, morally, religiously happen to us is because of forgetting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or being heedless about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this heedlessness would darken more and more our heart and would give more power to Satan against us. If you remember Allah, power of Satan against you becomes less, or in other words, your resistance against Satan becomes more. But if you forget him, your resistance becomes less, therefore his power becomes more and more. So he says, oh dear, try to undertake any task, any difficulty in this path in order to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make your heart accustomed to, used to remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that insha'Allah remembrance of Allah becomes a form, becomes a surah. Those who know philosophy, they know one type of jawhar is surah. So that remembrance of Allah becomes a substantial form for your heart. And La ilaha illallah, unity of Allah, becomes the last perfection, the highest, the final perfection of your heart. So that your heart is not only on the surface, but also essentially, substantially shaped and formed with unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's like, when you stamp on something, put a stamp, what you do, you put an impression on the surface. Yeah? If I, for example, I want to seal, I put a stamp. So I put an impression on the surface. But the unity of Allah should become substantial form of your heart. So it's not just a stamp on the surface, it's a stamp on the surface and substance. Like the stamp itself. So I think for today this is enough, and inshallah we continue this discussion next week بإذن الله. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
اللهم صل على محمد. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.